Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're talking about how to do very well at the Wyoming All-State Band audition. Each year, they prepare the rubric, and it looks like this. And it's pretty much been the same rubric in the 10 years I've been here, and it's probably been the same rubric before that. But basically, it's broken down into what do we have? Five parts. One, two, three, four, five parts. And each one of those will give you a certain score. They'll add all the scores together, and then they'll figure out where to rank everybody and how to seat them in the sections. Once you understand the rubric, you can really understand how to practice and how to make the best choices you can with the music and the scales that you have. So, this first slide, this first unit on here, let's look at this one. The first thing up we have is our scales. And for our scales, they're going to grade you on six different things, sorry. Rhythm, tone, notes, tempo, intonation, and articulation. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory. The rhythm for the scales are all the same. It's all the close A pattern. If you want to start working on this ahead of time, go ahead and get the close A celebrated method. It's a big, thick orange book. It's about $25. And on page 123 is the scale, this exact same scale pattern for all the major and minor scales. If you're working on this all year, you're going to have no trouble with these scales on the Wyoming All-State audition. So rhythm is going to be pretty basic. You should be able to get the rhythm correct. It's quarter note followed by 2/8 notes. It's all pretty simple. Tone, you should be practicing tone anyway and having a good characteristic tone. But if it's something that's challenging for you, it's probably not going to be any easier for you when you start playing with a bunch of flats or sharps or whatever is required in that given year. So again, rhythm, tone, these are things you should be working on, and even notes, really, you should be working on these kind of all year. As you get closer to the audition, you're really going to want to start making sure that you've got your tempo dialed in and that you can get really close to it without even using a metronome or thinking about it. So practice playing it at 132 and then kind of test yourself. Maybe play it and record it and then go back and see if how close you were. You've got plus or minus 10 beats a minute. So if you're as slow as 122, you won't lose any points for that. We'll come back and talk about notes and tempo in just a second. Intonation, that's kind of a hard one because as it's going by, it's really hard to listen if you're playing in tune. But if it sounds basically like a major scale, you're probably on the right track. Do be aware that every scale has a little bit of quirkiness to it that sometimes we have to, and particularly different instruments, we have to sometimes raise or lower things a little bit just to make them sound in tune. Be really certain that your octaves line up. A way that I would recommend practicing this is put a drone on or use a tuning CD and put it on the whatever the tonic is, whatever the note you start is. Put it on there, and then every time you come back to there, make sure that you can get to that note, and it should sound right in tune. Articulation, this one's a pretty easy one as well. If you've got the rhythm down, the articulation is pretty straightforward, but just making sure that it's not getting in the way. This is an easy one to get full credit on. So with regard to all the scales, we have a choice to make usually. If you've got them down and you can play them all perfect, you don't have to make a choice. It's just going to just play them. But for a lot of students, I find that they have to choose between playing the correct tempo and playing a version of the scale, maybe where they miss a couple notes here or there because they've practiced it too fast to begin with. I would just looking at the math of this, it's a far better thing to play the scale with no incorrect notes and play it even 20 beats a minute slower or even 30 beats a minute slower to get it into, to make sure that you've got all the right notes. 30 beats a minute slower is pretty slow compared to if you're supposed to play it at 132 and you're playing it at 102, that's quite a bit slower. But if that means you get all the right notes, you're really only losing 2 points on that. So it's really in your favor to take it a little bit slower and play it as perfectly as you can. Let's just look at the scales here. So this is the scale sheet. This scale sheet is the same every year. In the 10 years I've been here, this is my 11th year doing this. I don't think it's ever changed. It's always been this pattern, and they always select two scales to have everybody play. So you know what's on the test. You know how to start practicing this. If you feel like this is that area you're coming up weak in a particular year, it wouldn't be a bad thing to keep working on these all year round. Maybe when you come to your lessons, the first thing you can take it to your teacher and say, I'm just going to play scales for this first whatever, to play straight through it. And once you get through it, go on to something else and have them help you figure out where some of the fingering problems are, where some of the intonation challenges are for your instrument. So let's talk a little bit about the chromatic scale, because the chromatic scale is the last thing on the list here. And being that I teach clarinet, that we're going to talk about clarinets today, but this is pretty similar for all the instruments. You have your chromatic scale. It's tongued going up, but it's not staccato. It's just dun 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 dun. It's just very lightly articulated. When you're coming down, then you start slurring them. One of the things, an error I see a lot of students make is there's no breath mark made, and they can't make it all the way through. Now, if you're really good with your air, you should be able to make it all the way through this. But if you need to breathe, I don't think anybody's going to mark you off if you breathe before the high G coming down. So get up to that high F sharp, take a breath in time, and then come right back in. And I don't think anybody's going to say anything. I'm not even sure they're going to notice. But the rubric is its own for the chromatic scale. So making sure that you've got the chromatic scale down. Again, this is something you could be practicing all year round. The tempos are the same. If you compare the rubrics, this is the chromatic scale rubric. This is the regular scales rubric. Quarter note equals 132. Quarter note equals 132. I believe that's what they have printed on there. Yeah. So it's really just going to be the same, basically the same kind of thing. Just a matter of you get your own score for the chromatic scale. So that's an easy 30 points you should be able to get. So with those two, you've got 2 of the 5 on the rubric. You should be able to get perfect scores on those pretty easily. So now let's go on to the etudes. The etudes are their own thing, and each one gets its own rubric. And you can see here, I've put them, they're together on the page here. Again, you get 35 points for each etude. And they're not identical, so don't think that they are. But let's look at the first one. So the first one's usually the fast etude. This is a technical study of some sort. And just like with the scales, it's a far better thing to take it a little bit slower and to not miss any notes than it is to take it fast and miss some notes. So do the math here. If you, let's say you miss no notes, but you take it even 30 beats a minute slower. Okay, well now you're down to, you get 3 out of 5 on tempo and 5 out of 5 on notes. So that's a total of 8, right? Well, let's say you play it at tempo, you get 5 points there, but there's 6 to 10 incorrect notes. Well, then you're still getting an 8, but you've made 6 to 10 mistakes, right? And it's usually not just 6 to 10 because those things often repeat themselves. So it's usually a better thing to kind of play it a little bit slower and get it perfect rather than trying to play it too fast and messing it up. Intonation, this is one of those ones, it's really hard to kind of gauge this on the fly while you're playing it because you don't have any point of reference, but just making sure that if, let's say it's in concert B flat, every time you come to a concert B flat, making sure those sound about the same. Anything that's like a major scale, making sure it sounds clearly like a major scale, even if you're playing the right fingerings, but just making sure that it sounds right. That you can check this with the drone, just making sure that every time you come back to that one particular pitch, it's right where you expect it to be. Articulation, this kind of goes up there with the tempo part of this. A lot of times these will have some unique articulation or rhythm that goes with it. So you want to make sure that you're playing those as correctly as possible. Dynamics and music interpretation. Now this is where the two rubrics diverge a little bit. Tempo is also a place where they are not the same on both of these. So if I look at dynamics and interpretation on both rubrics, I can see on the fast one, it's 0 to 1 incorrect versus good musical decisions. Ultimately, you should always be making good musical decisions, but let's say there's a piano marked somewhere. It's playing forte for a while, and then you have to play piano. You want to make sure that it's very, very clear on the recording that, yes, here I'm playing piano, and I was playing forte before. The category of good musical decisions is a little bit subjective, but if it sounds like it's singable, it sounds like it's got good shaping to it, you'll probably get pretty close to full credit for that. I don't love the way this part of it's scored because it's really hard to kind of gauge this. and it's inconsistent between the two. But if you're making good phrases, good shapes, your breaths kind of fit in where they're supposed to, it's easy to get full credit on this. So let's go to the last thing here, and I've prepared a special slide, this is a separate video. We're going to put it together here for you on sight reading. But let's just look over the rubric real quick. So we've got, again, rhythm is one. Now, sight reading is only out of 20. So it could be a really easy 20 points for you to get on this, particularly if you're if you're good at the scales and you're good at the sight reading, you should do pretty well regardless of how well you do on the etudes. You always, of course, want to do your best. Rhythm, we've got for 3 points, you get 0 to 1 incorrect rhythms. Or, you go down the road here, 16 plus incorrect rhythms. I think by that point, the judge has stopped counting and will just give you a 1 at a certain point for that. Characteristic tone. Again, your tone should be consistent throughout the whole thing, right? Your tone doesn't change that much depending on what you're reading. And so just making sure that you're always playing with your best tone. Your notes, again, looking to make sure that you're playing all the correct pitches. It's sort of like rhythm. If you miss a lot of them, they're going to probably just stop counting and just give you a 1. Looking at tempo. Now, tempo is one of the ones they've specified. It's 104 here. And when we get to the sight reading app that I'm going to show you, you can actually set it up to really get yourself dialed in on that. But just have a good gauge of what 104 sounds like to you. Maybe it's a song you know from somewhere, and you can just kind of think that to yourself before you play. But if you know that's going to be the tempo, then you can be ready to roll on that. Intonation, it's the same as on the scale. So you want to just make sure you're listening for those and kind of hitting those as much as you can with a drone. Articulation, a lot of times these things are going to have some really quirky or specific articulation. So just look it over and have a clear idea about what does it mean to you to play, let's say, staccato or legato, or what do these different articulation markings mean to you? Have a clear idea about that and then be ready to play them. This is the one I love, dynamics and music interpretation. There's only 2 possible points here, right? There's only correct musicality, some musicality, or limited musicality. So how are you going to get full points on this? Well, I think the easiest way to think about this is to play it with really good phrasing. You just like an actor, you have to over project what you think. If it's a crescendo, make it really clear that you see that that's a crescendo. Do a nice, beautiful crescendo, and then go on to whatever the next idea is. Making good phrases, making sure every line has a nice, beautiful arc to it that we can hear very clearly. So we're going to go on to the app right now. Okay, so now I'm flipping over to my web browser, and I want to show you how a very great app that I found, how to practice sight reading. This is called the Sight Reading Studio. It's part of makemusic.com, and it's not free. I think it's $20 a year, and it's really, really, really helpful in terms of learning how to sight read. Now, one of the things you can do is you can set up these little templates with it of what you would like to practice. So we go to Start New Template, pick your instrument. So we're talking clarinet here, so we will pick B-flat clarinet. That. Okay, next. And then there's some presets. Now, if you use the app a bunch, you can set up the presets that you like. But I'm going to just kind of go through, I'm going to start with preset 1, just to kind of make some basic exercises. Go next. What are the time signatures you'd like to use? Well, any of these could really show up, but let's say 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4 for now. What are the rhythmic patterns you're going to see? Well, in this particular preset, those are the ones you've got, but let's see. What other options do we have here? I would suspect you'll probably see some 16th notes, and I would suspect you'll probably see some of those, and some of those, and some of those. What else do we get? Maybe some of those. Okay, let's leave it there for now. And then you can pick the key that you want it to be in. Okay, so you can pick major or minor. You can pick any one of the 12 keys. I would probably be guessing, but I would suspect that maybe it will be in one of the easier keys. They're probably not going to give it to you in, C sharp major. So let's say F major, G major, C major, B flat major. Here's where you can choose your tempo. So let's use metronome markings, and the full credit on the tempo looks like it's 104. So I'm going to say let's go between 90 and 110. somewhere in there, just to kind of get you some practice playing something near where you're going to need to be. So then you're going to go, okay, you can use the menus to change that. We're going to here to practice our template. Let's see what it generates. This is my new template. I'm going to save it, and then it will generate a new practice example for me. And I'm ready. And you need to set it up to run through your microphone. Okay. It'll test it. Great, good to go. It gives you the key. And as it's going through, okay, so here's the example it's generated. If you'll notice over here on the right-hand side, you'll actually have a timer for how long it gives you to, it's gonna count down so you can look through it, finger through it. You kind of have a sense of the key where you are. This one came out to be very basic and kind of easy. Again, you can change that template to be really, really hard or very simple if you want. And then as you go through, you're gonna play it. And once it's done counting down, you can make it start here when you're ready. You can actually, it'll grade it for you. Okay, so now we're gonna, I don't have my instrument out, but we're actually gonna play through this. We're gonna let it go. We'll take start now. And we're gonna let it play through here. So we're gonna get all of them wrong on this one. And it'll actually show you if there was a rhythmic error or a pitch problem, depending on what you're doing. So it'll give you a grade. I didn't play anything, so it didn't give me a grade, but you can see the ones you missed, and it'll actually go back and grade them. So this is a really effective way to practice sight reading, especially because you can generate them and you can make it play it back for you. There's a lot of features in this for $20 a year, but to practice sight reading, this is really the thing that's going to help you get full credit on there, in that you need to be sight reading things as often as you can. So looking at the rhythm of things, you've got a little bit of time to look things over. Again, characteristic tone, that's sort of a thing you probably either going to have it or you're not. But again, we want to always have that. Correct notes. Again, I would rather lose a point on tempo and play more correct notes than I would get full points on tempo and not play the notes correctly. Intonation, again, those things should all be things you're working on and already practicing with your teacher. I love it that there's only 3 different categories in the dynamics or music interpretation. You've either got correct musicality, some musicality, or limited musicality. Look, if you come in and you play it and make it sound like something that's absolutely beautiful, you will get full credit for that. But also, look at these. Also, the scoring on these are quite a bit less. There's only, in each group, there's only 3 possible points. So out of your full score, you're really not getting a lot out of the sight reading, but it's a good way to kind of make sure that you're doing it and that you're able to work on it by using something like this. If doing the app doesn't work for you, buy a anthology of whatever, vocal music or something, but just sight read through it really, really slowly. So anyway, I hope these tips help. Sorry, this is kind of a longer video and definitely less fun than just watching somebody play. But I think if you really consider everything that's on the rubric, you're going to have a lot more fun auditioning for All-State, and you're going to find you do better than you think you will. So if you need help, again, give me a holler out at me. So it's Joshua, JOSHUA .metz, METZ, at caspercollege.edu, and I'll be happy to help you along. Thanks so much. Bye.